Have you ever felt like your voice is trapped? Like no matter how much you practice and how hard you try, something is holding you back and is blocking your ability as a performer. What if the root of that vocal block was not actually found just in your voice, but in your own personal history? And today I'm joined by specialist counselor Ron de Jager to explore the powerful unspoken connection between trauma and the singing voice. And we're going to uncover what it truly takes to set your voice free. Ron lives at the intersection of world-class performance and clinical counseling. So he is a professor of music with a doctor of musical arts. And Ron himself is an accomplished vocalist, and he's performed for audiences and dignitaries around the globe, including King Charles, which is pretty cool. His unique clinical focus and research into the psychology of singing and the effects of trauma on the voice make him the perfect expert to guide our conversation for this topic today. He's also earned his Master of Counseling from Briarcrest College and is a professional member of the Canadian Counseling and Psychotherapy Association, and most importantly of all, one of the team members here at Therapivo. So we're super glad to have Ron with us today in studio to be able to record this together. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So just to kind of start off a little bit, can you give us a little bit of background? You've been working in music and in singing for years and performing in different ways. So our listeners who are listening, just so they have a little bit of context, like, can you tell us how you went from a professor of music and just sort of really being career-wise all on the teaching side to now, would you call it bivocational? Like you're still teaching and you're also counseling now.
Yeah. I think after my years of working with singers for a while, I started to discover different patterns as I taught different students and things that started to come up with different students. And I think one of the things that I started to realize is just how this instrument is different than another instrument.
Okay.
So like if you had a piano or something like that, or a violin, it's external. With us singing, it's very internal. So if I took a grand piano and I threw it out into the elements here in Saskatchewan, left it there for 30 days to 5 months, and cut some of the strings out, bashed up the legs, and then threw that onto a concert stage and expected someone to perform something beautiful on it, it's probably going to be pretty difficult.
Right.
And so I think it's a lot like humans as well, that analogy. There's parts of us that as through life and especially through trauma and things like that, that affect us as we sing. I think also singing is kind of an identity. And if you think of, if we use voices are very, very unique. And so for security systems and things like that, people will use their voice to speak.
Right.
So nobody else can speak and then open up whatever it is that's in there. So there's a bit of safety surrounded around that voice as well. And who we are, how we speak is all wrapped in around that. As we start to lose some of that security and safety, it can be taken right here sometimes. And often with trauma, it will manifest itself in the way that we speak, the way that we sing, and we can often take a lot of that tension and stress here. And so in singing, I think we're looking for ways to release that.
Okay. So just that kind of like the weathering of like our soul, our person, as we go through life and the storms of life affects like us as an instrument is kind of what you're saying. And that's where you started noticing trauma symptoms, like showing up in people that you were working with vocally.
Yes. And you start to realize that in certain parts of the body, we can lock that trauma and unwittingly carry a certain amount of tension, even pain, and to try to release that so we can find freedom in our voice, in the sound that we make, in the story that we're trying to tell. And so sometimes that tension can represent something that we're holding back, we've repressed, or anything like that. So just starting to become aware of, hey, I'm noticing this over here and this over here. I wonder how we can release that and maybe what it represents.
Yeah. Fascinating. Yes. Well, I'm looking forward to diving into this. So for our listeners, can you just start by explaining one of the powerful statements that I noticed in your research that I was reading? A singer's body is his or her instrument. Now, you've already mentioned that, but just really kind of dialing that down to singers. What makes a singer's experience of trauma so profoundly different?
I think even part of my own journey, I started as a pianist and then I went to a singer. So my instrument was here in front of me and I could play, but it was me and the instrument. and the audience was there. And then all of a sudden we take that away. It's like I lost my support there, and it's just me. And then that becomes a much more vulnerable situation. And when you're vulnerable, more things will start to show up. And so I think that as we start to look at the physical side of that, where are those things starting to show up? And I think we might be a little bit naive in thinking that we've got it masked and covered very, very well. But sometimes the audience is pretty perceptive and they're like, I see something going on there. What's going on? And no matter our best job at covering, our body still will show certain things. And I think as a singing teacher, I started to become aware of those things, like where's that showing up and why is it showing up? And what is it indicative of what's beneath?
Yeah, like it's a symptom of something rather than just it being the problem even.
Right. And I think going from a piano to your body being the instrument, just something like getting nervous. If you get a little nervous when you're speaking, the voice can start to quiver. You don't get enough breath underneath of it. And all of a sudden you squeak and you crack, those types of things. And so just learning how to just generally be comfortable with the body and finding out where those things are happening and why they're happening.
And so that body stuff might show up more for singers than other kind of musicians.
I think it will show up for other musicians, but I think it's more obvious for the singing.
Yeah, because it's just you and your voice up there. That makes a ton of sense. Yeah. And so you also said in there, of course, that, and you've been alluding to this as you've been speaking already, but trauma affects the entire organism: physical, mental, social, spiritual. Can you give us an example of how a past trauma like childhood sexual abuse might manifest in a singer's voice or in a performance in a way that most of us in the audience would probably not even recognize? Like,
yeah, for sure. I think something as traumatic, especially as childhood sexual abuse, especially if it's undealt with, the individual's never taken the time to really address it, hold it open. It can show up physically in different ways in different singers. But some things that I've noticed with singers is that, especially locking through the lower abdominal areas, through the solar plex, and right into the pelvis. It can be into the knees and the buttocks as well. All those areas will just lock and get tense. It can be jaw or tongue as well. It'll manifest itself. You can see it sometimes if the individual is really trying to get sound out without releasing. And you can see trembling in the lower abdominal area and especially through the pelvis. And so physically, you can see some of it. Some tension, and this isn't necessarily related to specifically sexual abuse, but tension in the forehead, eyes, like just there, which this will put an incredible strain going back through here, which can definitely affect the voice. Jaw tension for sure. So if this is coming through, this often position is a position of, we're not going to let anybody in. And in a place where you're trying to express very openly and freely, when you're not letting people in, people can see something's going on there, right? And so, and then the tongue, if the tongue is really tense, it will pull the larynx especially high, which means you're going to have to work extra hard. So if you can imagine if we've got tension here, 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 and here, and we're trying to make a free sound, how much that's going to hold the singer back. And not just in their sound, but in their storytelling, because it's like, we're going to have to work really, really hard to get this sound out. And you're working against all these roadblocks. It's kind of like when you're driving somewhere in the summer and they've got all this construction, and you have to drive around this and this. And if you could just drive straight there, it'd be so much quicker and smooth.
No, it makes a ton of sense for sure. So many people see singing as like a joyful and expressive act. How does unresolved trauma, Ron, create a paradox where the very act of singing can both be a source of potential healing and yet simultaneously maybe even at times a source or a way that a person is re-traumatized?
Music is such an amazing healer. And I think that we can never underestimate that. How much the music can actually heal as well. So
can you feel free to unpack that a little bit? Because I'm probably not the only person out there. I'm not terribly musical. And I've never really sung publicly out loud. So tell me more, like how can it be a healer?
I have to say, I'm not exactly sure how it does it, but I've seen it in action.
Okay.
I think physically, from a singer standpoint of view, just the fact that we have to inhale from a really deep place, release slow, and then release breath, that just breathing itself is cathartic. But then feeling that all of a sudden we can make sounds and that we actually have a voice and that voice matters.
Right.
So I would say that often with abuse, that somewhere the voice is squelched, and physically or psychologically. But if there was ever a time when the individual felt that their voice didn't matter, all of a sudden it starts to matter. And you have something worth saying. And you don't have to just say it with words. You can say it with music added to it, because there's so much more behind it when the music is with the words. So letting go is how we always sum it up in singing. And I think it's a lifelong journey of learning and releasing. But there are those moments, I think, in singing when all of a sudden just kind of all lines up and it gets very free. And you think in that moment, that was a moment I'd like to reproduce. And so we keep striving for those moments where the technique lined up and the expression and the audience was there. And there's something powerful when you're giving and you can't even hear anything, but the audience is giving back and you know they're catching the message. And it's almost like you become this conduit for the music. And I think that's kind of one of the goals we work for in singing. And that's freeing it up mentally so that we can become the conduit. That then the whole journey doesn't become about us. So I think one of they say the top fears in the world is having to speak in public. And I think once you become the conduit, it's not about you, and you can be free to let go. And I think that's when you can experience freedom in singing and actually to start to enjoy the music. And enjoy the process. A lot of it's about the process more than it's about the product. And I think when we get consumed with the product, which is like, how did I sound? Did I do diction here? Did I come in time? And was my voice, did it fill the hall? Was it resonant? Was I flat? When we get consumed with that, then we kind of lose the whole story. And when we're consumed with the story and the music, then all of a sudden we become more invisible, and it's not about us. It's more about that audience and hearing this.
There's so much in you say of like you said, there's catharsis. I think there's also, it sounds like connection in there too. And like that reciprocity, being seen, and validation and groundedness just of the breathing and being in your body. I can see why it would be healing. Other times, though, it seems it could be re-traumatizing.
Yeah, for sure.
Even
I never really thought about this until I was working with singers a lot more, and I started to realize that I would ask singers to breathe low, teach them how to do it. We get a little bit, and you just think, why can't they let go? Like, just, breathe. But especially if there's been sexual abuse, childhood sexual abuse, we're asking them to release the very part of their body where they were violated. And we're like, release it. And well, there's no way they can't. And so this is a much more gentle process. And you just have to be patient. And it's kind of like, when you find a new therapist as well, it takes a while to trust somebody, right? And it has to be a good fit. They're not going to trust you right off the bat, and I think I've likened this to Mary Lou Follis, who says it's kind of like a new hairdresser, right? You come from your old hairdresser and they're like, who cut your hair last? And we're going to have to let it grow out for so many months. And I'm not sure if I can do anything with it, And so just trusting that voice teacher, your new therapist, finding that space that's safe to let go. And that part can be incredibly healing in the process of learning the technique of singing, just by letting go that. And it's letting go of the violation as well while you're breathing, which can be so traumatic at the time.
Especially if obviously it has to be a safe teacher for this to occur, but I love, like, obviously we're passionate about counseling, but I just love how there's other ways, just in being in the world, for the body to find healing from trauma.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like singing with a good teacher is one of them.
Absolutely.
Which is super cool. So you use the term body armoring as well in the paper that I was reading, and body armoring, in your work with singers, what are the first things you look for that tells you that their technical struggle, maybe as a performer, is possibly more rooted in trauma rather than a lack of training?
That's a great question. And I think, as I think about it, I think it's probably the persistence of whatever technical thing that we're trying to overcome, that there's just no release in it. So nothing's ever for sure until someone sits down and actually tells you. But I mean, when you listen to a singer, just in the first stages of getting to know their voice and them a little bit, some things you watch for are physical things, like we mentioned earlier. Like, is there actual holding on? Is there tension? How about the release of breath? Can they actually just sigh and make it sound consistent?
Okay.
Is there bumps in that? Does it sound like, is the tongue in the way? Is the jaw in the way? Those types of things. And then the actual sound can tell you a fair amount about a person. So even when you speak to me, it'll tell me stuff about you. When I hear the sound of your voice, even if I never saw you, I'm like, oh, this sounds like this and this. Okay. And some of those assumptions may be right, and some of them may be incorrect. The rate of vibrato, so it's just a natural wave if the voice is free.
Okay.
If that vibrato is typically really, really fast, if it has a bit of a heave to it, sometimes it can be slow. So one we call a tremolo and then a wobble. So if it gets really, really wide, then there's a lack of general, what happens at the vocal folds is that they're probably not coming through as tight as you want them to, or there's a relaxedness around the muscles here, not enough breath movement, or there's hypertension through here, which can result in that tremolo, which sounds really, really fast.
Okay.
So the sound can also tell you a lot. And then just watching their overall physical demeanor. And lastly, how they interpret a piece. Are there certain pieces that are traumatic for them that they just can't connect with? And that might be the story of something traumatic that's going on, like a death or somebody going crazy, like in Gretchen am Spinnrad by Schubert, like one of those pieces. Maybe that's really too close to home for them to connect with where they're at in their journey.
Right. Yeah. So different ways that you see it makes sense. Yeah. So along those lines, Ron, like it's a natural thing for performers to seek validation from an audience, right? They want to be, you're taking the effort to stand out there in front of everybody.
Yeah.
Right. Tell me about this connection over to attachment, which we often come back to in our shows. A history of insecure attachment, which can come out of childhood trauma and just problems or shortages, things that were lacking in a person's experience of being parented. How does that amplify possibly that need for approval and turn the stage into a place that actually also may feel very unsafe?
Yeah. If there's been a time when there's been an attachment that's broken, especially between primary givers like father or mother, definitely transfers over into we want to be accepted and we want to be good enough, especially if there's any point where a parent expected more of a child. What they did was never good enough. You had to do this. They always had to suggest something else. And no matter how hard the child strove, they could never reach that full approval of that parent. And that translating over into singing is, I just got to be better. And I think it's often the type of singer that's like, I will fight through this and I'm going to do it. And that fighting attitude, it's good in a way if you can get it to work for you, but it can create a fair amount of tension in the body as well, which we're trying to release.
Yes.
If we translate that into going in front of an audience, it's almost like the performer can put the burden of the response on the audience before they've even performed. I know that they're not going to like me because my technique isn't up to snuff. And Sally Jane, who just sang before me, is a much stronger singer. They're going to like her better. I know that I go to tune sometimes here. They're going to catch that and they're not going to like that. They're going to think that I'm not very expressive. And all those thoughts racing through someone's head, especially when they're thinking, okay, I got to get a little breath in. Okay, what's the German diction for this song?
Yeah.
And then be expressive and make it look very pleasant at the same time is such an amazing and huge burden to carry.
That's a lot to carry out onto that stage. It's massive.
And then to say, I've got this incredible message I want to share with you. And yet it's hampered by all this going on,
Mhm.
going on and through the mind. And so looking for that validation all the time,
Yeah.
it's the hamster wheel. It's just exhausting.
Mhm.
So working through where did that lack of validation start?
Right.
And how is it different now? I've said to my students before, has anyone come up to you after a performance and said, wow, you really suck. You should not sing. In fact, I don't know how you ever got there. Terrible communication and you're flat as a pancake. Like in all my years of singing, no one's ever done that. And people have said some pretty honest things, but never like that. And I said, what if someone did? Well, probably their opinion wouldn't matter that much. You're probably a very unkind person.
Yeah.
And we're just
more
going
of
to
a
move
reflection on them.
on. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so taking that burden off of the audience, what if we actually allow them to just respond however they're going to respond?
Yes. Yeah.
There's one time I sang and I thought, wow, that was just junk. That was trash. I came off and I thought, well, I think I want to go bury my head in the sand. And someone came out and they're like, Ron, that is the most beautiful I've heard you sing. So the trouble with us singers is that when you sing, you make a sound, it's a wave, right?
Yeah.
So when that wave leaves you, it has to actually go distort off something, come back to your ears, and what you hear is a distorted sound.
Okay.
So what everybody else is hearing, it's different. So we're really not a great judge of our sound.
Okay.
So when you hear yourself on a recording, you think, wow, that sounds different than me. It's pretty close to you.
Yes. Yeah.
So understanding that even our voice, we have to let it go and think, well, I really don't have 100% accurate reading what that's like. So I'm going to leave that up to the audience.
Okay.
And to really give that as a gift away.
And almost like trusting the process more than like trying to exert so much control over it.
That's such a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
So lining up the process, finding out what you really want to say, and then just letting that go and let the product be what it's going to be.
Yeah. Love it. Yeah. That could apply in so many areas of life, but
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Definitely fascinating in this context here. And you wrote as well, it's talking about like negative voices maybe that come towards us when the silenced voice is that of a singer. Issues of both childhood sexual abuse and singing are compounded. Can you unpack that a little bit, Ron? Or are we talking about a literal loss of voice, like vocal function that can happen, or a psychological block, or both?
Yeah, for sure. It can be both.
It can be both.
And so there's something called muscle tension dysphonia.
Okay.
Which can come from a variety of things. And one of the things it can come from is trauma. And I have worked with singers who have experienced trauma and within a few days, loss of voice. They've just lost their voice because something traumatic happened. And the muscles through here tend to get really tight. So it's just like knocking on a brick wall to try to get through that. And it's definitely starting from a traumatic place.
Yeah.
So it can be psychological that affects the physical for sure.
Right.
Another one to call is mutational falsetto or puberphonia. And that can happen with young men when they're going through puberty.
Okay.
It just means that the voice doesn't change. So typically the voice will drop an octave. With puberphonia, they'll go right through it and the voice won't drop. And so you can have someone in their later teens even talking way up there. They can't get down into the lower voice. And so helping them to access that is quite a process. And not all, nothing's ever all the time, but those are sometimes indicative of something traumatic that's happened where the young man just can't get through into that lower voice.
Wow. Yeah. You can't really separate between the physical and the psychological in those moments. It's all intertwined. I mean, in like so much of our lives.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think all the battles in singing are won and lost right up here.
Yeah.
And I think, it's a lot for the same sports as well.
Yeah.
A lot of these two things they overlap.
They interlap, don't they? Yeah. And it was also fascinating for me to read, Ron, that even specific like I should have practiced this word. Pedagogical?
You got it.
Pedagogical exercises can be triggering for a singer. So like when a singer works with you and maybe sometimes you're aware it could be triggering, maybe sometimes it surprises you, but how do you create that sense of safety that allows them to just explore their voice without that fear or possibility as much as you can of being re-traumatized?
Yeah, and I think I just discovered this, more and more into my years of teaching when I started to become more sensitive towards things that could be possibly triggering.
Mm.
So when students come, typically the first thing you're going to talk about are alignment and breathing, two of the basics of singing. I think with some people, I would get them to stand against the wall and sometimes it's something behind their head so their head isn't out of line, just to line their body up and to get to feel that their shoulders are open and back. Some of those positions can be a little bit triggering for anybody, really. If I open my chest up wide, if I do this, it's like hit me, right? It's a very open, vulnerable position.
Yeah.
So to get them in that position right away, you need to be really sensitive to be like, okay, what am I asking when they're going to lift their chest a little bit more? And especially for some females, that's difficult. And just thinking, okay, I'm okay in this open position. Just be sensitive to those moments right at the very start and read your singer and be like, okay, is this right? Okay, they're pretty comfortable.
Right.
Next is breathing. And I think if they're having a lot of body armoring, especially in the lower region, then find different creative ways. So sometimes we can sit on the edge of a chair, very tall, and then we can bend forward and we can breathe that way and feel what's happening through the lower abdominals and the back muscles. Sometimes that position might not be the best for someone. Sometimes we separate our legs and we'll hang over so we can connect again. That can be very triggering for somebody.
Right.
And I think also just being aware of your position in the room and where the singer is so that they're in no way feeling uncomfortable.
Yes.
And so if someone's really locked and you're thinking, wow, I got to get that unlocked, there's something going on there. Things like just lifting their legs to 90 degrees and marching around the room might help to unlock that. To lean against like a grand piano and then twisting, especially if they're locked through the solar plex, that can really help them to start breathing and find more access in that way.
Yeah.
So being incredibly sensitive and creating a space where, hey, I can tell that this probably isn't an easy exercise for them. I'm going to be more creative and we're going to go over here and try this instead.
Yes. So much good in there. Like, I think you could teach a course on trauma-informed vocal teaching. That's like what it is, right? Because I could also see situations happening or conceive of them happening where a teacher might just see this as resistance to the process, or why are you fighting me, or why won't you do the work? And yet the person has this real reaction from their trauma that's valid, that's happening. Maybe they don't even know it's from trauma, but their body is saying no.
Yeah.
And so just creating the space and providing safe alternatives and choice and consent and all that is so valuable.
Yeah, that's such an astute observation. And trying to find how maybe the music is going to heal them. They're there for a reason. They must love to sing deep within, but something's stuck somewhere. Where can we find that stuck thing so we can find the joy in singing? And not just for audiences, just singing in your own practice room, in the shower, just having that voice and feeling it free. Where can we find that little stuck spot?
I love the invitational nature of that. So good. Okay, let's do this, Ron. Imagine a professional singer comes to you and they're feeling stuck. And maybe they've lost their upper range or they're battling some kind of crippling performance anxiety even. What does the beginning of that journey with you look like? And how do you build that foundation of trust right from the first session with them?
I think just creating a space where it's okay for them to make ugly sounds.
Okay.
So whatever's going on, if it's like, I lost my upper range, I push when I get to my upper passaggio, those types of things. It's like, you know what, that's okay. You know what, there's many who have gone before you, right? And I think just creating that space where it's like, you just don't have to be perfect because we want to make that perfect sound, perfect expression. There just is no perfect singer.
Yeah.
And so I think just maybe creating a space where, you know what, it's okay. Because you want your agent to know that you're on top of your game. You want the director to know, and you want the musical director to know, I am on all the time, ready to go, sing at the drop of a hat. And here, let's just make some ugly sounds.
Okay.
Let's see what's going on.
Huh.
And just being freely, just going kind of like on a discovery adventure,
Yeah.
just on this journey together and be like, let's see what we find.
Right. So the permission to not have it all together, I think I'm hearing you say, opens up space for curiosity, which opens up space for new learning, discovery, healing even.
Which is very much the singing world, but very much the therapeutic world as well.
It's a fascinating overlap.
So it's just, here's the free space.
Yeah.
Let's just go find what we're going to find. And it's okay to find whatever. Let's look at this together.
Right.
And we're going to take it out and we're going to hold it. And we're going to think, well, that's interesting. Now let's talk about that, work through that. And seeing wise, we can do the same thing.
Yes. Yeah. Fascinating. You were almost a therapist before you became a therapist, it sounds like. And so like whether it's that or even what we've talked about as it relates to counseling, there is a goal of healing, right? And to help a person feel liberated in their voice and their body. Could you share with us an anonymized story of transformation, maybe a client that came with a specific vocal or performance block, and then what they were able to achieve after working through that underlying trauma with you?
Yeah, for sure. There's one story that comes to mind. There was a young lady who came. It was early on in my career as a professor. And she came and she sang for me, and she looked like she should have a big, huge sound.
Okay.
And she, very musical, had sung for quite a while.
Yeah.
And we were working in a lesson once, and she had this kind of thin, high sound, which kind of is indicative of the larynx being pretty high. And we were getting nowhere. And finally, one day, we just kind of stopped. And I said, why don't you look in the mirror and just say, I'm beautiful. She was a larger bodied young lady, but that had no bearing really on anything, I thought. And so she looked and she said, I'm beautiful. I'm like, well, maybe we could try that with a little bit more believing behind it. And then she broke down. And then just started to explain the trauma that had happened in her life earlier. And I wasn't a counselor at the time, so but I worked closely with one of the counselors at the college, and so we recommended that she go down and talk to somebody, and she did. And she started working through this. She lost a significant amount of weight, which actually really affected her voice, and it's almost like she lost that voice. And we just had to start rebuilding from the bottom up.
Wow.
And so she she was singing soprano. She turned into this beautiful, big mezzo voice, which is just amazing singer. Went on to her bachelor's, her master's in singing, has taught for us for quite a while. And just amazing to see the freedom in her story, in her person, in her singing, and just able to share that journey with others now as well.
Right. Yeah. No, such a powerful story. And if you see her, do pass our gratitude on
for sure.
Her courage and allowing you to share that here. Makes it so much more tangible. Yes. Lovely. So if there is a performer out there that's listening right now and they're thinking, this is me, maybe not this story exactly, but these body armor or something's tight, whatever it might be, it's what I'm going through. What is one thing that you'd encourage them to do today after this show ends to start their journey? Not the whole 9 yards, but just one step towards reclaiming their voice.
Yeah. I just think it's so important that you talk to somebody.
Right.
Just to start that journey. So in the story of this young lady that we just talked about, she felt safe enough to just say, okay, here's my story.
Right.
And I wasn't a therapist at the time. So I could come alongside her and be like, here's what we can offer. Here's how we can start this path to healing. So just starting to just even verbalize part of that to anybody who can start walking alongside, because stuffing down just never works.
No.
It's going to manifest itself in some way, right? And that's why, this whole, the body keeps the score, it really does. And it will start to show up. And so when singers have trauma and they haven't ever talked about it, or they're stuffing it down and hope no one notices, it's going to show up somewhere. And so just that initial bit of just talking to anybody who can start to get you on a track or path towards healing is just such an amazing, and it takes a lot of courage in the first step.
It does, yeah. It's a bit of a cliche in our business, but it is the good old name it to tame it.
Yes, yes.
There's just something about stating your truth, sharing your story, beginning to name what's happened. That's so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it seems like we can underestimate just the naming part of it. And it's just so important, especially in our business.
Yeah, for sure, Ron. No, it's lovely. So this has been incredibly insightful. So thanks for sharing with us here. Now, for anybody who wants to learn more, or if you would like to explore doing therapy with Ron, you can actually connect with him on his bio page on our website at oyf.link/Ron. That's the short link to it. If that seems confusing, just go to theusualtherapivo.com and you'll be able to go to our team and navigate through to his page there, and you can connect with him that way. And we will leave a link in the show notes below as well. So that's a great way to connect with him. In the next video, we're going to go deeper with Ron and talk about 3 signs that trauma is affecting your singing voice. So very practical how-to video that we're doing there. It'll be both compassionate and educational, so be sure not to miss that one. Thanks so much for your time here, Ron, today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.